There you go.
So let's hit
Good.
record.
So let's hit record. We're recording, and then
You just moved your camera now, bro. You're not in the middle. So just so you know. There you go. Right on.
All right.
All right.
Looks like we are live.
We are live.
We got
Okay,
people
We got
waiting.
people waiting.
So let me double check.
So let me double check a couple of things
and we'll
here
get
real quick,
rolling.
and we'll get rolling.
And
You just moved your camera. You just moved your camera now, bro. You're not in the middle. So there you go. There you go. Right on. All right.
is that coming from your side?
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was checking audio.
All right, guys. We are live. It is 7:30.
7:30.
Welcome to Wapiti Wednesday Live Q&A. And tonight we have a special guest, Mr.
Giglia from the Elk Bros.
Hey.
Joe, how you doing?
I don't know about how special, bro.
Appreciate you joining me. In fact, Larry Gill says looking forward to tonight's episode of my good friend Joe. You two make a great team.
What's up, Larry?
That's awesome. Well, all right. For those that may not know you, Joe, tell us a little bit about who you are and the Elk Bros and all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. So, backwoods redneck from the Carolinas, came to New Mexico in 1980. Saw my first animal when I was elk, when I was deer hunting. I'm kind of a woods type of guy. I came from a poor family, backwoods family. We hunted, and that's how we put food on the table. My wife and I got married at 20 years old. Didn't have to. And one of the ways that we made ends meet was through hunting. And I was hunting deer, saw my first elk at 19. I think I was 20 years old when I saw that booger, man. It was like, honey, I'm home. This is one way to fill up the freezer right here. So ended up on my first elk hunt and shot my first elk at 20. And it's been downhill ever since with the obsession anyway, man. So the Elk Bros. Elk Bros are basically, I've been an elk guide. I've been a bow hunter myself for, this will be my 40th season. I've had some pretty good success as an elk hunter. And I've been an elk guide for about 20 years. And some of my guys at one point had, they found out I had a little heart issue going on. And they were like, Joe, man, before you die, you should leave some of this information behind. So that's what friends are for, right? And, they were trying to convince me to do this stuff. And it was like, well, I'm not the type to write a book. And I couldn't do all this stuff. And lo and behold, I came across, I'm a retired teacher and coach. That's what I did for 30 years. I coached for 34 years. And I taught video production, graphic design, web design, broadcasting, all the things that are in this realm. And I came across an online course for elk hunting. And when I saw that somebody was doing that, I was doing the same thing in my classroom for my students for my courses. And I was like, booyah, there it is, man. That's the thing I can do right there. It's my skill set. I get to put my passion with hunting, with my passion with teaching and coaching, combine those three together, and you got Elk Bros. So I called up the guys and I said, look, we're doing this. And, I knew I was going to start building the academy. And I told them, I said, we need to build our target audience. And at that time, it was YouTube, right, Mike? I mean,
Right.
3-4 years ago,
Right.
YouTube was the bomb, right? So I said, we'll do a YouTube channel. And then I was reading, I said, there's this thing called a podcast? And so I started talking to Gilbert. I was like, bud, you interested in doing a podcast? And Gilbert's like, man, they pay me to talk. So we started doing, it aired, I think, our first show. It's going to be 3 years. This 20th of this month will be 3 years that we had our first show, and we were so pumped, Michael. Man, we had 30 listeners in our first week, and we were like, "Yeah, we got 30 listeners." So It's just gone bonkers from there. We are having so much fun. I mean, we're doing our own camo. We've got gear. We've got the academy. The podcast has exploded, and we've got listeners in over 9,000 U.S. cities in 87 countries, and I don't know what they're doing in Kazakhstan, man, listening to us.
Wow.
But you know,
Wow.
it's unbelievable. And we've got a grunt tube happening. We were working on calls. We've got so many things happening. We've worked with Hunt Wars as official coaching staff, just having a blast, man, helping people be successful in the elk woods. And it was all because I wanted to create an academy, and I wanted to create it in my coaching style that is completely different than what anybody else did. So that is the short version of Elk Bros, and we have a crew. There's myself, my brother-in-law, and really that's what I honored the symbol with, Leroy Chavez, who is my brother-in-law. We've been best friends. We're married to sisters. We've been hunting together. This will be our 40th season. And it was to honor that relationship, and at the same time, all those other people we had been in shared a camp with, so we called it Elk Bros. And we have me, Chav, Gilbert Ornelas, who has been instrumental in this, and the Venezuelan Mafia round out the core, man. Luis Gonzalez and Manuel Grateron. So that's our crew, and we're expanding now. We're expanding with coaches. We're trying to do some models that have never been done, and we're just, like I said, just having a blast, man. Just chasing the passion. I don't hear you now, Mike. There you
That
go.
pull it back. That pull it back.
Yeah, there you go. You're back now.
For some reason, though. Let me try something. Yeah. The guys are saying there's a bad. Echo on my end, and I'm trying to eliminate it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I apologize, guys. So yeah, having fun. That's the key. Now, how long have you guys been? Doing Elk Bros now?
So the first podcast, like I said, this will be 3 years this February. Will be a 3rd-year anniversary of starting it. And really when we started the podcast, I started bringing in, it was just me and Gilbert for a while, and then I started bringing in the bros, and started with Chav, and then I started bringing in the Mafia guys as their skill sets started to develop, and also because our group is so diverse. I mean, we're so diverse in ages, backgrounds, employment, income levels, religion, politics, skill sets, and where we are in our hunting journey. So by having all of us together, I was finding that things that I take so much for granted, Luis is like, dude, well, how does this really work? Or, it really added a whole cool element to the show that brought it a lot of depth.
Nice. So let's see. Still looking forward to your. Joel from Delta Outdoors says, "Looking forward to your Joe. You want to kind of touch on that a little bit about what you got going?"
Yeah. In fact, I'm pretty excited about it. This is what it looks like right now. This is one of our prototypes. This is actually in our camo cover. I'll kind of pull this back a little bit so I can show some of the stuff. And really, where this came from is most of the guys that have followed me knows that I'm a flex tube kind of guy, right? In other words, I have found that as a solo hunter, one of the most critical things when I have animals and I'm getting in tight is to be able to throw my calls behind me while still being able to stay in shooting form and being able to make calls and steer animals in direction. So by having my string on this and having it wrapped here, I can have my bow in hand, I can take that up, I can call and throw a call behind me, and now I've got a bull that thinks I'm 40 yards further back than 30 yards in front of me. So it really helps with pulling animals to me and not getting that hang up. And what's so great about it is when I do that, all I got to do is let go of it and it just drops right down and I'm in shooting position right there. So I had been about the flex tube. Well, for 3 years now, when people would tell me, well, where can I get a flex tube? I sent them to Amazon, to the Carlton Mega Grunt tube. Go get that. And if you've ever seen the Carlton, it's the flex tube. It's got the sound chamber, but it has an 1.25 inch and a half opening on one end of it, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
that's never bothered me, but there is no back pressure. And if guys don't understand what back pressure is, when it's kind of like blowing like that and all your air coming out of your body, or getting a bugle that has a mouthpiece that goes in tighter and you get this pressure, so you can actually create a tone quicker, longer, with less breath, basically, right? So it makes it a little easier. So I had found out and heard through the grapevine that the Carlton Mega Grunt Tube was not being produced anymore, that they were basically, because of the popularity of the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, where am I going to get my grunt tubes from, man, if they're gone? And I was like, well, heck, man, if that's going to happen, I'm going to make my own. And so I had a good friend of mine to help me out, and what I did was I basically took that flex. I have the sound chamber on the end. It has some of the features where it's kind of curved on the inside, so you get a little bit of reverb on that. But the big deal was I changed the mouthpiece so that what I have is, wherever you see these lines, it's actually baffled on the inside. Okay. So now I get that back pressure. But the cool thing is, when I inhale back, I get this little whistle wheeze, just like a bull. And that happened by accident. When I heard that, I was like, yeah, man. So this is what it is, and it's I'm real excited about it. I mean, I'm pumped, man. And,
nice.
It's not. It doesn't have that giant area to reverb here, mm-hmm. right? It doesn't have that, but. And look, I've been a guide for over 20 years. If I'm behind somebody and I'm 20 yards back there and I'm working a bull, I don't care what my grunt tube looks like, right? It's not going to matter. But if I'm on the shoulder of my shooter, I'm in the same situation as when I'm a single solo hunter out there. So when I have something like this, once that critter comes in and it's in that stop and scan position, where it's looking and it's trying to peg you out, I'm done with this. So this ends up down on the ground. And if I end up calling with my mouth, I'm easily pegged because they are so doggone good at that, right? So that's why this is kind of where I go for me. Because, with that Carlton, I've taken 36 elk in the last 38 years using just a flex like that without using one of these big. So it gets the job done, man.
It does.
It's all about making them think, putting on something in their mind that you're someplace else, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Exactly. So thanks for asking about it, bud. I'm excited.
When are you looking at launch? When will it be available? When will it be available?
Oh, so I was talking to you about this, man, before we got on.
I know.
And oh man, I tell you, for a 30-year teacher coach going into the production manufacturing of a product, it has been. You think teaching tries your patience? Oh my Lord, man! So it's now been 6 months out. I've had my first version come in. It wasn't up to my standard. I've set it back. So now we're making adjustments on this. We're making actually a new blow mold for one part of it. And I've got to have this out before the hunting season, man. That's it. I'm 6 months in already, right? So all I can tell you is if I could put a date and a time on it, these puppies would be in your hands already. But I don't get to choose that. I'm working by other people's schedules and manufacturing practices. I lost you again now, Michael. I don't hear you, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to
There you
figure
go.
out
Yeah,
this
I'm
echo.
trying to figure out this echo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an ever
But yeah,
evolving,
it's an
ever
ever-evolving,
frustrating process.
ever-frustrating process.
Yeah. That we all hunted with them. In other words, I used this. Everybody in our camp, all the bulls that were taken this year on our Colorado hunt were taken with this grunt tube. I guided with it throughout the season. Um, Called in several bulls, and one of my hunters killed a 343 at about 18 yards. And just an exciting hunt, man. I mean, just a beautiful, beautiful bull. So we've had some great and some great times together. In fact, when these other ones are manufactured, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, man. I don't know if I'm going to keep hunting with it because we've become such good friends, but what you can do today in manufacturing, because all of this is 3D printed nylon. It's crazy. So I'm kind of interested to find out what the plastic sound is a little different than this. So we'll see what happens with that. Exciting. You're still off now. Yeah, you're off. Do they hear you? Yeah, I can't hear you yet. No sound.
But now you can.
But now you can.
I can now.
That.
Yep.
And then that's what.
Okay.
This is just.
Mind you guys, this is only the third time we've had a guest in this new program. So,
now,
right.
can they hear you when I don't?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll see if they comment.
All
right.
So
So let's do this. So
last year,
you guys kind of branched out into some other states' new territories,
right?
Yes.
What
Yep.
was your guys' approach?
So we went.
Approach.
What's that?
What was your guys' approach for new areas? Because this was a place you had never hunted before.
This was a place you had never hunted before.
Absolutely. So basically, we did the same thing that every other hunter is going to do out there. You got to take a look at, number one, your crew. We're in a group. Our group has various ability levels. Where I'm able to go jump off into some places and dive into a canyon, that's not going to happen for RC, or it's not going to happen for Gilbert. That's not their kind of ground. And it definitely wasn't going to happen for Chav, because Chav is still learning to walk after coming off of fighting cancer for the last 2 years. So when you look at, and yeah, then we had Manano and Luis, and those guys are like Billy Goats, man. They can go places. And then we had Cole Wilkes, the Flatlander, who was a beast in the mountains. And then we had Rob with us, who's in incredible shape. So we had all these various types of ability levels. So you got to take a look at that, number one. And you got to be honest with yourself. Want to be able to make you as efficient and as effective for that. So I immediately started looking at areas that I knew would be a mix of certain elevations, certain slopes, certain types of areas that would work for all of us and give all of us something there. So that was one of the gauges that I looked at. Then I had to think about time. And like a lot of people that are traveling from back east, how far are you going to go, man? I mean, are you going to drive all the way through Colorado and go all the way to the far western end of it and drive through all those elk that are there? Or are you going to make a decision on some place that's a little closer so that now you have more hunting time rather than driving time? Right. So I had to take a look at the guys from Texas that were, for them, it's 11 hours to get to my place, right? And then from here, for us to get to our camp this year in Colorado, it was about 4.5 hours from my house right here. Because what I ended up doing was trying to look as close over on the other side of the border as possible. And I went to the most hunter pressured areas you could find. I mean, all my research said, if you're going to hunt here, bring your own rock. Everything that I looked at, everybody's saying, don't go here, don't go there. But we hunt in a very populated hunter area here in New Mexico, in several of these areas. So that wasn't something that scared me off at all. You know, if I could find areas that had certain assets, certain features that I knew were going to pull other hunters either deeper or only so far out of their camp, I knew there were going to be areas in between, and there were. So the blind that we put chav in the area that we hunted in, was probably, as the crow flies, only 200 yards off a two track, right? And probably, I would say 2 miles at the most from the camping area, right? And most people were just going way past it. He saw more elk at his blind than probably anybody throughout. So, you know, that just tells you something. It also tells you at the time of day that he was seeing most of those animals were between actually probably noon and 3 p.m. when they were, because he was actually sitting on kind of an isolated little water hole is where I put him, right? So that kind of tells you a little bit of something there. But the process was, I pretty much looked at it. I e-scouted. I went on. I kind of knew what areas I wanted to go to. I e-scouted and started looking at them in 3D. I looked for certain features like wilderness areas. All right. But I knew that if we were near wilderness areas, there's people that are going to go into wilderness areas. They're going to push animals out onto the fringe of wilderness areas. And if we had people in our group that wanted to have that wilderness experience, you know, like Rob or like Cole, you know, we had the gear to be able to do that, and they could take off inside there. I also looked at, you know, basically the access and what those roads were like in the different areas. I have found that in Colorado, the better the roads, and man, let me tell you something about Colorado. God bless those people, man. They have the most incredible roads, forest roads I've ever, better than my road in front of my house out here, right? Excuse me. They're just great roads. And the easier it is for people to get in with campers, RVs, and things like that, the better the roads, the more convenient type of camping areas, like if there's cabins, if there's Airbnbs, if there's special campsites that have all the bells and whistles, that's going to attract more and more people. And so those are kind of the areas that we knew we kind of want to try to get away from, right? So we found something that had a little bit rougher road system, had the type of features we were looking for in the land style. And then I had actually selected 3 different large areas in Colorado in 3 different units that I had found the features I was looking for. And then what I did was I took 3 days, 3 or 4 days, and I hauled from here in August to get eyes on the area, to associate what I had been seeing on my 3D e-scouting with actual boots on the ground. And basically what I was doing there is I was running everything I can or could to be able to check any off-roads, to check for track, to start checking for, and I was looking for cow tracks. I wasn't looking for bull tracks. I could care less about the bulls at that time. So I was going through just trying to find sign. At what level, at what elevation was I seeing the sign? Was I seeing any sign at all? And what was interesting about that, Mike, was the area that I thought I was really going to be hot after, when I went and checked it, it was a dud, man, and I immediately X'd it off, right? So that left me with another side. And it was interesting because this area was split by a highway. You had the south side, you had the north side. North side, all the way up into the high country, great sign. South side looked gorgeous, hardly anything. But they had been running cattle in there. They had been cutting wood in there. They had been doing all this stuff that, and I mean, you went in there, the razors, the families camping. It was just one of those type of areas that,
Gotcha.
kind of push
Gotcha.
animals out of there, right? So, I got boots on the ground. I figured of the three areas, we decided that we were going to go to one of them first. We got there, and when everybody got to camp, we set up camp, Mike. The next day was going to be our scouting area where we were all going to disperse scout before opening. I, for some reason in my mind, because I had already been there for a day and kind of checked the area out, something in my head told me, you know what, man, I think I better go check this other spot. So I got up at 2 a.m. I drove 2 hours to to one of those other areas while everybody scouted the one that we were in. And I went over there and I ran it. And I started hitting ridges, started checking ridges for sign that fingers were coming off, just like how they like to cross over. They like to come through the saddles. They like to run the fingers. So I was just doing the high stuff, checking the run routes, right?
Right.
And as I'm doing this, I decided to see if I could get some kind of response. I was smelling elk. I was seeing some track. And so I cow called. And it was the biggest mistake I made of the entire hunt.
Wow.
I get a bull to respond to me, just screams at me, and I shut up, and he comes running in, comes up to me. I've got him on video at 12 yards. And, I mean, broadside 12 yards the day before the hunt, man. So, I'm standing there in black and, a black shirt, black pants, pack on with my camera. And he never smelled me, never knew what I was. He ends up turning and going out of there. But, it's like I used to tell my athletes, you don't want to use your best throws in practice because you ain't getting no awards for that, right? So, yeah, it wasn't what I wanted to happen, but I continued down that ridge. I hit another group of elk, and as soon as I did that, I backed out. I go back. I tell the guys, I think we ought to go try this in the morning and then have a meeting. So that's what we did. We drove an hour and a half. We hunted this area in the morning. Everybody came back just blown up with stories. So we gave up our afternoon, went back, broke camp in 44 minutes because one of our goals was to stay mobile. We broke camp in 44 minutes, drove all the way back, and we were hunting that location in the morning. So out of the 5 core guys, my goal, I was more focused on getting Chav in and out of his blind and doing that. Had some opportunities to hunt with some of the guys. Really, it was like graduation day. Like when I went with Luis, I wanted Luis to call. I was like, I ain't calling for you, dude. It's your thing. And so I was like in observation mode, just enjoying that. And we had some incredible encounters together that people will see on video later. And I wanted to hunt with Cole and Rob. Rob is the one that helped me with this. And so I called in a bull for Rob, and he had an incredible experience that, he was, he made some mistakes, but, it's just an experience factor. And so out of the core group, Chav had a shot opportunity. Manano, Luis, and Gilbert all killed. And so 3 out of our 5 core going to someplace we had never been before. The Elk Bros, who were accused of, yeah, you guys just hunted. Yeah, you just hunted home, man. Why don't you go make it difficult? Blah, blah, So we had a blast, man. Elk are elk. We didn't change any of our playbook. We did everything just like we do. And we had an incredible hunt in Colorado. And the people were incredible we met there, too.
That's awesome. Let me try one thing. Let me try one thing here real quick.
Sure. I still haven't been able to get on I can't see any, for some reason I haven't been able to get on to see
any of
this
replay,
YouTube.
any of the replay.
Let me see. Maybe this will do it. Boom, I'm in. Okay.
I'm starting to think that. Maybe I had it playing in the background. And that's where that echo's coming from, but I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, Delta Outdoors, man, in Utah. I, I've this year we took a look at considering actually going to Idaho, and for me, for those guys in Texas who would have been a 20-hour. Yeah, I don't hear you. You're off.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I got you now. Yeah, I got you now. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing.
Oh, you were looking at the replay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm getting text from some of the guys wondering if my voice is coming through your computer into your microphone, and that's where the echo's coming from.
Hmm.
I don't know. Because I've got all the
I wonder.
same settings.
So I'm gonna turn off my audio here and see what happens. Okay. So let's see here. I'm going to change my.
See, the good news is, no, I still got the echo. I can hear it.
So let's see, output. I'm going to change it to my internal speakers. Okay. So let me hear you talk now.
Oh, I think we may still have. Yeah, that echo's still there.
That echo's still there?
Real quick. Bear with us, guys. No.
So I tell you what, you guys, while he's messing with this, man, ask him questions away. Anything you'd like to hear. As you can tell, I won't shut up, man. I mean, you could put. I'm like a hamster with this thing. You know, it just keeps spinning.
That's what the guys are saying. They're like, Joe sounds great. And I'm like, you guys have heard me talk enough. You're here to listen to Joe. So deal with a little bit of reverb for a moment. So, all right, let's kind of talk about strategies and approaches. What's your approach early season?
So actually, most of the hunting I do is early season. Here, I'm going to switch this around so I can see what people are saying here as well. So as an elk guide, most of the time I've had to guide in the second half of the season. So forever and years, I usually have had 5 days starting at the beginning of the season, 5 days and 5 days only to get it done. So all of my tactics have been very aggressive and all leaning towards early season, talking September 1st through September 10th. Okay. Now, depending on what happens with the calendar, because it's Memorial weekend, Labor Day weekend, right? Labor Day weekend has done some shifting. So where it used to be on the 1st or the 2nd, sometimes it's like on the 4th or the 6th now. So we've done some play with that just to try to avoid some of that Labor Day weekend traffic, right? But I don't know that our benefit because I'm not able to tell you how many times that me and Chav have killed animals on September 1st and animals that are bugling on September 1st. I killed a bull. This bull ended up scoring 336, and this bull has a club on one side, has this real crazy spear going up, and has some weird. He's got 6 points on that side, but it's a freak on one side, and it's a perfect 6 on this side. Had he had the exact same sides on both, he'd have been a 370 bull, and he ended up scoring 336. This bull on September 1st was screaming and had probably 7 or 8 satellites around him. and brought him in unbelievable on that. Now, is that generally how it happens for us? No. So I'll tell you exactly what I told a buddy of mine that ended up coming out and hunting an area that we like to hunt. I went and took him out there and I told him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go in this zone right in between this bedding area up here and this feed area down here because of how the slope went. And I said, it's a lot of scrub oak. It's ugly. You're not going to think that there's elk in there, but they're going to be in there because everybody else is going to go up here and they're going to go down there. And I said, all I want you to do is I want you to go through and I just want you to cow call. And I don't want it to be, and so when I tell like I want them to cow call, it wasn't like this stuff. It wasn't hoochie mama stuff. Right. I wanted them to go through and I wanted them basically just to, and that's it. Early season mews can very easily be bulls communicating with each other.
Yep.
Okay? Yep. So bulls are a lot of times are going to come check this out either because they might be feeling a little bit and wanting to see if there's a cow there, or they're going to check out to see if this is another bull that they're going to be able to pow with, or they're going to be able to measure up, they're going to be able to check out. So my first call, first thing in the morning when I call over an area, is I'm doing a short. I always call near to far. In other words, I'm checking to see if there's any animals close to me, just using the diaphragm with the mouth. So my first call is just checking near. And I let that set. That's my next one, right? If I don't get any response from that, especially if I'm putting over top of a little bowl or something where I know that that can carry, it's now I'm doing what I'm calling is casting calls. Just like a fisherman, man. You're checking, you're hitting this eddy, you're hitting that eddy, nothing there. You move to the next area where you can be efficient with that cast. And I'm moving. But when I'm moving now, I'm going to sound like a herd, a small herd of cows as I'm moving. And that's just for other things to pick it up. And I'm not moving fast. I'm moving, but I'm not moving fast, especially in areas where I'm smelling elk, I'm seeing sign, I'm seeing track. I'm taking my time because I'm wanting animals to come to me in their time. If I'm just flying through there, then by the time they come through, all they're going to do is catch my scent because they're going to come up behind my draft, right? So I'm really taking my time with that. Now, I told my buddy to do this, Mike, and I get a call from him on the second day that he's hunting. And actually it's a Zolio. He sends me a message on my Zolio. And he says, bull down. His first year ever hunting elk in an area he had never been before, using a technique that at first he really didn't have any faith in. But he told me, he was like, dude, he said, after the fourth bull snuck in on me, he was like, I decided I was going to now do it with, believe in what I was doing, and I was really going to pay attention. And sure enough, on the next day, doing the same technique, he catches a 5x5 sneaking into him and shoots that bull at 20 yards, right? So that's kind of an early season technique that I like to use. Now, does that mean I'm not using location bugles? Heck no, I'm doing that. But generally, like if I give that cow call and then I give that tube cow call and I'm moving through, I will reach out even farther with a location to find out if there's anything interested. That's how I ended up getting that large bull. I go into an area, I come over, it's a burn that I knew animals have been going in. It was only a 4-week-old burn. Only 4-week-old, but it went through it so fast and we got so much moisture that there was already 2 inches of green grass growing. So it was becoming a magnet, right? So I go through and I had done some casting back before. So I had done my cow calls and I did a location back there. Now I come up and I throw out a cow call And this bull screams, man, because he thinks, yeah, there's a cow here and there's a bull, and I'm going to tell everybody I'm the man here right now. And as soon as he screams, I could just tell by how he came out and the rasp that he had that I went right back at him. And when I went back at him, and when I cut him off, and usually I don't take that, but he was so aggressive that as soon as I cut him off, he went berserk. And other bulls started screaming behind him. So all of a sudden, you have this situation. Here's a bull that's coming into an area with cows, which is me. This bull, who evidently has satellites around him, right, screams off just like that. Now these satellites scream, and so immediately you have hot cow syndrome going on.
Right.
Yeah, so it was the perfect storm. So I basically threw Chav out in front of me. I told him to get in position. He gets out there. I use the terrain so I could drop off behind him, still see him. I'm not seeing the bulls, and I'm basically reading his temp, his reactions, and trying to pull him past Chav. Well, for some reason, he starts to circle around Chav. So he's trying to kind of go towards his downwind side to get to me. So I did just like I pictured as a record on a record player, where he's at and where I'm at. I just start spinning like this and go up on a ridge, and I start just raking. That's all I did. I start raking up on the ridge. He starts screaming, and Chav said, and I couldn't see this, as soon as I raked, this dude runs and blows up a tree, just blows it up right in front of him, right? And he starts coming by Chav, and he comes by him at a little bit of a brisk, kind of like a little jog going by him. And Chav, by the time he gets drawn back, the bull's almost all the way through past him, past his shooting area. And Chav doesn't call, so he doesn't make any noise, doesn't do anything, and the bull ends up blowing right by him. No shot. Well, I'm up on this ridge, and I'm thinking, there's no way this bull's going to come into me. I got my bow down by my feet. I'm thinking, there's no way this bull is going to come in here. And, you want to see that bull? I have to find a picture of that bull. I'll see if I can find one here. And so I'm about to do my third set of raking, and just as I'm getting ready to go up to the tree, I catch some movement, and I look down, and I can see the rack coming through the trees. And I only see the one side. I only see the 6 side. Right. And I saw that. I was like, oh, buddy, man. And he's coming. So now I've got a bow at my feet. I have a tree in front of me, basically, that's blocking my shooting lanes. So at this point, you got to make a decision. And this is where most people screw up, Mike, and you know it as well as I do. They freeze up there. They worry about spooking the bull. And so they don't reach down for their bow. They don't try to get to the shooting lanes. Well, I'm not going to kill anything without my bow. I reach down. I get my bow. The bull is feeding. He's looking up on the ridge occasionally, trying to see what's up there. Goes back to eating. So I come around and get in front of the tree to create my shooting lanes. Now, this bull is coming to me. So here's another mistake most people make. They get nervous and they're like, oh, he's coming and I can call. So maybe I should call, right? And no, man, he's coming. Why let him peg you? So he's coming, checked up the hill. He starts working up the hill. The way he's going, now I'm an instinctive shooter, and my bow was probably 35% let off, maybe, at 75 pounds. Right. So as that's starting to happen and that bull's coming up, I'm figuring, okay, he's going to come through. I'm going to have a place to draw right behind these, because there's a whole bunch of trees. I figure I'm going to have a place to draw. He's going to step out. He gets behind the trees. I'm getting ready to draw on him. He never steps out that other side. I catch movement, and he's actually coming to me, straight at me. I mean, head on. And he's at 28 yards. He's at 25 yards. And I'm getting ready to figure it's going to be something where I'm going to have to bugle and draw and then just take my frontal, right?
Right.
He turns right when I at 18 yards, and he goes broadside with a whole bunch of aspens right there. He comes through, he stops in front of me at 18 yards. I'm seeing parts of the animal, and he bugles, man. And when he bugles, he starts palpitating, you know, and I catch that bounce, that part of the body. I knew exactly what I was looking at right here. I drew back. He hadn't finished the bugle when I let it fly right there. Um, End of story. Now, end of my story. This bull goes down. I scream at him to stop him. I bugle at him to stop him. And so he goes down. He gets in where he goes down there, and basically he's going to stop and die. Unbeknownst to me, Chav's down there, sees this bull come down there. He's at like 50 yards, flings an arrow at him, goes right under his belly, and makes him take off a little bit. I scream at him again, and the bull stops, and I go down. I'm waving Chav off, and I'm calling at Chav, trying to get his attention.
Right.
So here's the cool part. All of that calling I did at Chav to stop that bull, I get to Chav, 5 more bulls come into us. I'm talking to Chav, a bull comes down and is coming. I go, Chav, bull. I turn him. He has an arrow on. That bull stops. He's at 12 yards. Chav draws back, looks at the kill, lets it go. And about that wide of a small pine in front of him centers that thing. Right. He just never even looked at the bull and let it fly. And I was doing what you were doing. I started laughing, man. This bull takes off. I start cracking up laughing. I scream at him and bugle at him. He stops up on the hill because he doesn't know what happened. He hadn't smelled it. He wasn't sure what was going on. And this is another thing, kind of a fallacy that people, they think animals, when they go out, they just disappear. But there was so much activity in there. These bulls were worked up, and they knew something was in there. They just didn't know what, who, how, right? So I'm laughing at Chav for pegging this tree. We go take his arrow out. We sit down. I'm telling the story about that. And I look up and I go, Chav. Another bull comes down almost exactly 8 yards away from us where that other bull was. And we're sitting there with nada. So I pick up a pine cone and throw it at this bull, man. I mean, it was the most awesome morning. It was so hilarious. We leave from that situation. We're heading back. I said, well, my bull's down. It's dead. Let's hunt back to the bike, get it in this area. We'll pack it out. As we're going, those bulls had gone up on the top of a ridge. I call, a bull comes hauling down the ridge, 35 yards in front of Chav, pegs it. We have 2 bulls down before 10 o'clock on September 1st.
Wow.
It's like unbelievable, man. So I know I went down a rabbit hole there. I just had to tell that story. I'm sorry.
No, rabbit holes are good, and rabbit holes happen all the time. So,
yeah.
Okay, we had a couple of questions. So Jeff wants to know, Joe, have any tips for determining how far away?
I can't hear you real good. You have to turn your volume up, bud.
I'm trying to keep that echo around.
There you go. Right.
So it says, have any tips for determining how far away a bugle is and how you move in?
Okay. So a lot of this is kind of relative to your area, the thickness of the vegetation, whether you've got ridges on the side, the time of day, because early morning air, cold air, sound carries so much better. When animals are out in the open, they carry so much better. If they're on the ridge directly across from you, they carry so much better. So sometimes some of this is relative. But one of the things that I have found is, and I don't want to tell you wrong on this, because it's almost like the more haunting and melodic, the farther the animal is from you. It almost, everything kind of blends together, just has this haunting noise that has to it. And that means that bull could be 400, 600, half a mile, depending on what the terrain is doing, right? So when I hear that, a lot of times you can tell that it's bouncing, that it's coming from a long distance, and you know that. And really, I don't worry about, I don't go, is it 600 yards, is it 800 yards? I could care less. I just know that he's not anywhere within my zone.
Yep.
And the first thing
Yep.
I'm doing is I'm checking that wind and I'm gone. And some people, they question my aggressiveness, but when you're hunting public land, there's too many other variables that can happen when an elk is sounding off. Because once, I actually like hunting quiet elk because I know how to kill quiet elk. I'm going to come back to this on those noises, but I want to just tell you this. I want you to think about this, right? A lot of people hunt with a run and gun style. You know, it's that type of style that I want to find that one bull that wants to play. There's nothing wrong with that. If that floats your boat, if that's how you do it, if you're a place where there's a lot of bulls, cool, awesome, great. But I just want to put this in your head, right? So let's say that 1 out of 20 bulls, and depending on the time of year, what's happening, whether, because a rut, y'all, a rut is not a regional phenomenon. It is an area. It is a location phenomenon, right? Because there is a cow in heat, and so a rut occurs, right? Those pheromones get in the air, and it makes animals go ballistic. So when you're out there, you can be doing all your screaming, looking for that one. You could be going by 20 bulls looking for that one bull. 1 out of 20, right? So I want you to think about that. If you're looking for 1 out of 20 bulls that want to play, then you're hunting 5% of the bulls in that area. All right? Oh, let's even take it down a little more. Let's say 1 out of 10. Now you're only hunting 10% of the bulls in the area. 10%. Okay? And think about this. How many people are using that same style? That's pretty much what everybody learns. I mean, they go to YouTube videos, they go to different things. They learn and they want to scream bugles, get a bull worked up. He's going to run in, he's going to come in 20 yards, you're going to pull back, you're going to kill it. Right? It doesn't happen that way. Does it, Mike?
No.
Is that how it happens?
No.
Okay. So get this. Here, this is where it even makes better sense. So if 95% of hunters, because that's what I'm saying, I would say about 95% of elk hunters hunt that way. That's just from my perception. Could you take that as well, Mike? Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So if 95% of hunters are looking for one bull, that means 95% are hunting 10% of the elk. That leaves 90% of the elk for me, right? Mm-hmm. Because y'all, if you can kill a silent elk, you can kill any elk. All right? So, and here's the other thing. Out of that 95%, only 5% of them are actually going to kill an animal. Right. So you have 90% of people that aren't going to punch a tag because they don't have necessarily the skill set. They're out there screaming, doing the same thing for 10% of the elk out there. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's important to get across. Okay. So going back to your sound, as animals start getting closer, I start hearing more detail in their voice. I start hearing more of the rasp. I start hearing more of the minute parts of their voice as they're doing, those chuckles. There's certain things that they will do that really give it away. But as they're getting closer, once I start hearing those details and I start hearing that real good inside of it, where it doesn't just sound where I don't hear that, I know that I'm getting that booger within my 200-yard range, right?
Yep.
Depending on the area that I'm in, the vegetation, the terrain, that still might not be close enough. If it's very open, it might be. And so if it's something where he's moving towards me, and he's been doing that besides me moving in, now I'm going to have to start thinking, man, I got to start thinking about my setup, right? But now, so going back to your voice, the thing that I have found is as they start getting closer to you and on top of you, they almost sound like they're far away, but not that melodic far away. It's like, it's so airy. It's like the details that you were hearing, the melody that you were hearing, now you're hearing this exhale of air, and everything sounds like he's like, I mean, the first time it ever happened to me, I was like, God dang, man, he must be going away. And I look up, and that bull's only 50 yards, 30 yards from me. But his scream did not sound that close. You know, it's a hard phenomenon to describe. Do you know what I mean, Mike?
Yeah, it's one of those things where trying to judge exactly where that bull is based on his bugle, so many variables. You know, is he bugling towards you? Is he bugling away from you? How thick is the vegetation? So many variables. So many variables in that.
But let me tell you something. If you start hearing a glunk,
Yep.
you start hearing that glunk,
He's close.
that booger is on top of you, right? I mean, you're in his dish. So you hear that, you know you have him on. If you hear him starting to wheeze, you hear him starting to do little moans, you know, start hearing those pants as he's coming through. That booger is coming in and he's on top of you, okay? So I kind of, in my academy, I put some things for like 600, 400, 200, you know, and then 100. And just to give people a general idea. And once you hear those, like if you see a bull down in an area and you hear him bugle, you know, range him. What is he? You know, start measuring that inside your head. You see a bull at 100 yards and he bugles, right? Put that in your head a little bit. Now, if there's a lot of brush in there, once he's at 100 yards, it's not going to change a whole lot unless Mike, you know, unless it happens to do what Mike is saying. He turns his head and he bugles away from you, right? Then all of a sudden, sometimes, especially if he's in coverage, you're like, oh, he's running away, you know? And some people will make a mistake and they'll get up and they start moving towards him, and next thing you know, you look up and the bull's right there. So...
Absolutely. So yeah, and that's one of the things that we talk about, you know, at ECA is don't work elk, work areas, because you have 95% of the people that are, you know, covering ground looking for that one bull. We want to work those areas and find those silent elk and make them become vocal and make them want to be able to play. And in fact, great thing that you mentioned about silent bull, because that's going to tie right into the next question. The other day you posted a video about a double bugle. Why don't you talk about that a little bit, about what it is, how you use it, and kind of responses you get.
Yeah. So the double bugle actually became originally was my signature call so that my hunting buddies knew it was me. I was having so many problems calling in my own hunting buddies, or they would hear an actual bull and we'd get back to camp and they were like, dude, I heard you right over there. So I turned and went away. And I was like, well, where were you? And they were like, well, I was so-and-so. And I'm like, man, I was 3 miles away from that, you know? So that was another rule that we created was I don't care what it sounds like or who you think it is. Check it out. Go check it out. So I developed the double bugle so that I could actually give my whereabouts at times for guys. That was my original purpose, all right?
Okay.
So Chav and I had been on a herd. We got right in the middle of a herd. We're working it. We're paralleling the herd, which is one of my favorite things to do. I like to be on the downwind side of them, you know, away from their thermal, so that I can parallel the herd. Because if you trail a herd, you're setting yourself up for a lot of failure, man. You can't trail a herd. Because number one, that bull that you're hearing that's talking to you, that's advertising as he's going to a destination, when he stops and talks to you, his cows are still going. And then he's going to make you think he's right there, and you're going to think he's interested because he's given those little advertising roundup type bugles, those little short bugles, and and you're like, oh man, he's interested. He sounds aggressive. And then next thing you know, he's like 300 yards up the hill, screaming again, letting his cows know where he is, and you're like, oh, he's running from me. He must have cows, and he doesn't want to fight, and all of this stuff. So I always like to get on the downwind side, out of the thermal, and parallel the herd. And my goal is to actually try to close that gap, because as you're moving up a hill, things get tighter. What's wide at the bottom of a mountain gets tighter at the top. So as I'm moving up, a lot of times that herd will actually come to me. And we're doing this, me and Chav on this group, and it happened perfectly. The herd of cows moved through. The bull had been back. He had been sounding off at another bull. The cows were up there. I was like, this is aces, man. I just get right in between, throw out a little cow call, and here he comes. And I end up shooting this bull at the closest I ever shot one, man. It was probably 5 yards when I shoot this bull. I shoot him so close, my arrow passes right through him, dies on the other side, and just goes down, to the ground. Just lost all the energy and drops. The bull dies within 20 yards. I've got this bull down. Chav had split off from me because he was chasing some of the other parts of the herd. So we got separated, real thick area. So I wanted him to come to and help me with this animal. So I started screaming my double bugle obnoxiously. And, my double bugle is like, so that's my double bugle. I'll just start coming down and I'll go right back up with it again. All right? Well, I'm doing this obnoxiously. One after the other, one after the other. Chav, where are you? One after the other, one after the other. Chav finally comes to me. Before he did, I called in 4 other bulls. Came in on me silent. 4 other bulls. Never made another sound. They just came in to measure up what was going, because they're hearing 2 other bulls in there. It sounds like one bull cutting off the other one. So this is what I started to gather up. As soon as that started happening like that, I was like, the light bulb went off in a couple of ways. That's when I first started thinking about scenarios, about not targeting a bull. In other words, not engaging a bull. I can have a target animal, but I don't have to engage him to bring him in. In fact, one of the most effective ways for me to get that animal is by not engaging him, by making him think that there's another show going on, another picture, another painting, another scenario. Now, you've heard Michael talk about his breeding sequence, and you've heard him talk about, some of his sequences and things that he does, right? Well, we have our scenarios, and it's so funny. People that hunt elk, elk are elk. So once you start discovering behavior, I did these certain things that I had never had a name for. It was just what I did because it was a reaction to what bulls did. Other people develop names. I'm like, oh, that's what you call that. So, it's kind of interesting how that happens. But I started figuring on this, right? And so I started thinking about it. And then I would go, and I was hunting the rut, and I had bulls that were sounding off, but they're going to a destination. So I'm following these bulls, trying to get into parallel them. So I would throw a few cow calls behind me. I'd throw a location bugle back behind me. Nada. Zip, right? And I'm like, I throw out another location bugle as I'm moving up, trying to find out which direction they're going. Nothing. And I was like, well, let me try this. I throw out my double bugle, and immediately he responds back. Now, in my head, you got to think about, why does he respond? Well, it's because it wasn't a bull advertising or engaging him. It wasn't a bull going, where are you at? It was 2 other bulls that were engaged. And when that happens, there's a lot of things at stake here. Either he just wants to throw his hat in the ring because he's hearing 2 other bulls and that's possibly got a hot cow in there, or his cows might be interested because there's 2 other bulls being engaged like that. I have called cows right off of a bull sounding like a bigger and badder bull, right? So there could be different dynamics as to why they do it, but it has happened way too much. So I have discovered, a lot of times I've been in areas and I've location bugle, nothing. Move, location bugle, nothing. Throw out a double bugle, boom, just like a shot gobble, man. I get a response. And that's all I need is that one response. If I get that one response, I'm in the money. Now I know what I can do from there, right? So that's where the double bugle came from, how it developed. And then I really started figuring that when I did some scenarios, I could actually, the biggest bull I ever killed, this bull back here, that bull's a 351. That's the biggest one I've ever taken. And that's one of my early bulls. And that bull taught me so much because I got on him at about 3 in the morning in the moonlight, his herd, traveling across with them, right? And did everything. He was always, for some reason, this bull never trailed the herd. He stayed up on an upper wing on that herd. And I don't know if there were bulls harassing or what, but he stayed up on an upper wing, always away from me. So I'm going through cows. Got cows busting because they catch my movement, and I cow call and settle them down. I did this from 3 in the morning to daylight. I stayed off of them. Then from daylight, I probably boogered that herd maybe 3 times and was able to settle them down just with cow calls. Stayed with them, and all the way until it was probably about 9:30 that I had gone to an area and tried to get around, tried to get on the upside, tried to do it without doing the wind, dropping into some stuff, using the terrain. And when I get there and I know I'm going to come up and those animals are going to be in front of me, I get up there and I look, and they're going down away from me into another park just where I had almost come from. And at that point, after being from daylight to like 9:30 following this herd, I got this little pissed off frustration happening. So I went like a bull in a china closet. I just started running down that hill, breaking branches with my forearm, screaming bugles as I was doing it, going all the way down. And I come down right before I'm in oak brush about 10 yards from the edge of the park that's got a lot of trees that you can just see underneath of them, real beautiful area. And as I get there and I come in, I settle down, I start moving towards the edge, and I see 2 spikes about 150 yards bedded down in that park. And I hear that bull screaming off to my right. And I knew with those guys bedded there, and at that time of day, because about that time it was about 10 o'clock now, I knew that these guys were finding their bedding area. So I settled in and I thought, all right, if they don't want me to challenge him and he just keeps moving when I do, then maybe if he doesn't want to be in a fight, maybe he's going to do just like my students at school, and when they hear there's a fight, they're all going to run in and want to watch, right? So I laid out 3 different diaphragms on my leg, and I started giving some sounds, and I started with some cow sounds, and then I started with a real small whiny bugle off to one side. Then I did a medium bugle answering over here, and then I did a big bull right where I was at. Just sounded like this big bull telling them, like, stay away. And I kept the spacing of those a little bit off. And then I started bringing the spacing of the calls a little bit closer, like animals coming into each other, getting worked up, to the point where the big bull was going, another bull was cutting him off, and he was responding back. I made it sound like there was getting ready to be the biggest fight ever in that location. And all of a sudden I look up, and those 2 spikes out in that park jumped up, looking towards where those screams were earlier, turned and started running off. And I was like, whoa. And I looked over there, and under the pines, because in this area, because there's cattle there, pine trees are usually clean up to about 5 feet, and then the branches go out 4 or 5 feet like that, and you can see underneath everything, right? And I see the legs of this bull coming, and I see the body, and it's huge. I'm like, yeah, he's coming, man. And at that point, I was just feeling real good about myself. And then, y'all, this bull takes and he takes his horns down to go underneath of a tree. That bull back there does that to go underneath the tree branch. And when I saw it, this is early in my elk hunting career, my heart, boom, 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 boom. I could hear my heart coming out my mouth. I could swear the elk was going to hear it, man. And I always set up on my knees, and I set up in shooting position because I'm able to take my knees and I'm able to rotate with very little movement if I see an animal's going into a different direction like that. And because of the way the growth is there, it's easier for us to shoot under than to be up high. So I'm like this and I'm watching, and he's coming right at me. Oh my Lord! I'm like, and he's coming and he's coming and he's looking. He's trying to see where this fight is. But I had been back in the oak brush about 5 yards, and that oak brush has got just the bottoms in there. He's coming. He's coming. He stops and he stares at me. And at this point, he's 20 yards when he stares at me. Now, as a kid, I hunted a lot, and my dad used to tell me, never look at the eyes of an animal. They can feel it. Now, I don't know if it's true, but I was not looking that bull in the eyes. I was looking at his feet. So I'm sitting there. I've got my arrow knocked. I'm just like this. Remember, I'm instinctive, and I'm like, that sucker just has to come to this direction. He turns, and he starts to go broadside. And when he turns, he stops with the tree right in his kill zone. And he looks over at me again, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. June, July, August. I mean, it just seemed like forever. And then finally he takes the step out. And when he does, I bugle and I draw at the same time. And elk have a fatal flaw, man. He stops, he turns and looks at me, staying broadside. I never looked at him. I'm looking at my spot. Hundreds and thousands of shots that have left my fingers. All of that of looking at the target and letting my mind do its thing, I never even knew I released. And I saw my arrow hitting its mark right there. You know, that was the first time I used a scenario to successfully bring in a large bull. And that taught me so much. Everything I did all that day taught me so much. So, yeah. That was a double bugle in a long way around, man.
No, that's awesome. It's amazing how our encounters, if we're open and we pay attention to each of them, how we can pull so much information and learning out of those.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, we got another question here. Do you guys hunt normally from the bottom of the drainages in the mornings in the dark and gradually hike up in increasing daylight? Or have you hiked to the top in the dark and wait for thermals to change to work the fringes of the bedding areas? Yes.
It depends. And I can tell you this. Almost all of us make the mistake of being where elk are instead of where elk are going to go. And a lot of times we end up chasing them. But the problem is myself, I'm generally on animals an hour before daylight. So if they're down in the bottoms, I'm most likely going to be in the bottom too. And because the thermals are falling down, you know, it's a risky business to try to come down to them. You got to generally in the morning, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to let them come up to you. But then that's risky because it just depends on which direction they go. I'd rather be on these critters and know where they're going in so that I can get moving and try to parallel them. So if they're in the bottom in the morning, I'm generally in the bottom. And I'm generally on them, like I said, well before daylight. So now they're still going to be out there and I can make a play on them. If it gets daylight and they start to move into an area and they don't work out with my play, I want to look where that lead cow is going and then screw everything else, man. I'm checking my base map. I'm looking at what that looks like, or my Onyx, whichever you're using, and I'm getting out. I'm checking the wind. I'm using my thermals, and I'm getting to where that lead cow is going in. And I'm making a move to get in a parallel position immediately if I can. If I cannot get that move made. In the evening, it's it's so crazy because in the evening, a lot of times we start out real high, and those boogers are going to be coming down, right? So we end up chasing them down. Well, I really like to be in transition areas. I like to hunt the areas between the bedding and between the feed. A lot of people are going to wait at the parks, or they're going to be up high trying to get them to tuck there. I like to work in between. And I like to work it, especially if I've located animals in there, if I'm smelling animals, I'm finding fresh urine, I've had bugles, I know that they're bedding in the area, then I'm actually taking my sweet time in there. I don't want to get in a position where my thermals are going up to them. So I just want to be real relaxed, working at a high enough high that I can catch them just coming out of the bed without being down low and letting everything just spread up and just blow everything out. So it just depends on that. But I can tell you, man, in the morning, if they're in the bottoms, I'm generally in the bottoms. Unless it's real steep country and I've come over and I've located them in the bottom from the very top. I'm not going to run down to the bottom to get to them because now I've just screwed myself. Okay?
Yeah, that's one of those things that they can move up the mountain a heck of a lot faster than we can in that steep country. Steep country.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. The thing is if they're in the bottom and you're on top of the ridge and you've done some calling, they're responding to the calls. You really got to try to find out if you're hearing cow calls. If you're that close and you're hearing cow calls, then you're actually in pretty good position. If you're not hearing cow calls and you're just hearing the bugles, you got to really kind of get an idea where they're going to go. What is the direction the wind is coming from? Because those animals are going to go in the direction that wind's coming from. They're going to play the wind, all right? So if you're getting in there and like it's a type of canyon situation, and it's feeding down the canyon, they get a crosswind, and you know where the north face is up there, you better just start being smart about where they're going to go because they're going to hit that, all right? And they're going to work up in it at an angle, trying to get up into that north face up there. So if you're on the opposite side, you better get down and get across and start getting ready to work it. So you got to just think about where's that animal at? Where are they going to be? Where are they going to want to go? Because they're going to a destination. They're not going to stay down in that bottom. Now, I had a great question from somebody today, Michael, and he was like, I was hunting these elk and I found where they were bedded and it wasn't 2/3 of the way up. It was almost halfway up. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Where you found them, was that a bench area that behind it then went steep all the way up to the top of the hill, right? So, yeah, that's why you're going to find those elk where they've got that 5 to 15% grade bench where they can bed down, and they don't want to bed on something that's steep up there. They're not going to do that. So it depends on where that's happening and where that's occurring, right? And they've got the steep stuff at their back already, so you feel comfortable with that. Or they've got a whole bunch of downfall at their back. They feel comfortable with that as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the favorite places we hunt is a bench, and I've talked to a lot of the students about it. And it's exactly what you explained. It actually has that gradual and then goes steep. But on the north edge, I mean, it is blow down mass. And then on the south end is a real open rocky type ridge with some mini cliffs. So, all right, we're going to have to start wrapping this up, guys. So, Joe, last thought. What is of a piece of advice that you give to not just a new elk hunter, but maybe somebody that hasn't, they've hunted 3, 4, 5 years already and never got an elk? What's a piece of advice you're going to share with those guys?
Well, if you've hunted 3 or 4 or 5 years, if you're having encounters, then you need to work on your end game. If you're having encounters, you got to understand more of what it takes to close the deal, and you're going to have to become a little bit more aggressive. I think the best advice that I give a lot of people is if you haven't killed an elk in 5 years, you got to take a look at what's happening with that. If you're doing the same thing every year and getting the same result, you know, you're not going to get a different result doing that. So you've got to change. And generally, most of that is, you hear me say the word aggressive a lot of times. When I say aggressive, I don't mean anger aggressive. It doesn't mean me screaming at every bull. That's not what I mean. I mean, you got to be aggressive in your moves. You have to be aggressive in going off the beaten path, you know, getting in areas that, away from trails, away from your comfort zone, going into places that a lot of people don't go into, or, really working on making sure, number one, that you get to draw your bow. I think there are a ton of people, Michael, that have as many opportunities as I do that don't know how to finish because they won't pay attention to their shooting lanes, and they end up behind stuff, hiding behind stuff. And so now it's like, well, I didn't have a shot because it was behind this. Instead of making the move, and they're like, well, I don't want to make a move because I'm going to spook them. Well, always do the math, y'all. Do the math, So if you sit there where you don't have a shot and that animal walks off, what's the result? You don't get an animal, man. It's gone, right? Okay, so you take where you do make a move. Well, now you got two possibilities. You end up getting a position for a shot to where you can kill that animal, or you blow that animal out, which is the same result as the first one. But now you got better odds, right? So always, always think about what you have to do to draw your bow and get a shot, and do that. If if you're like, well, maybe I'll see this animal again, I'm sorry, it ain't gonna happen. Very, very rarely that you get an animal like that goes by you, that scents you, that smells you, and he's just been educated. He's gone, right? It's so little chance that you're going to call that animal in right there. And with the rut, they're moving so much. So my best piece of advice is, if you're not killing an animal, look at why. Is there failure points that are causing you to do that? Change those failure points. If you're the failure point, you need to change your habits. You got to become more aggressive, understand setups. And most people, I'll tell you, most people don't kill an elk because they don't know how to set up. And that's the biggest one. You have to always, as soon as the animal's there, you got to be looking at what your terrain's giving you, what the vegetation's giving you, where the wind is, and put yourself in the best position to get a shot. And, you're doing the right thing. If I could give you the best advice, you need to be someplace like here, listening to Michael. You got to go out and find as much information as possible. Up your knowledge. If you up your knowledge and you become better at calling, you've just totally changed your odds. Because if you're not able to create opportunities, then you're waiting on opportunities. So again, you're not being aggressive. And the only way that you can create them is by now being able to speak the language and understanding that animal. Okay? So there's my advice, Michael.
Perfect. So, listening to you, so many questions started popping in the head. I mean, you and I mean, we've been on podcasts together and stuff, and can sit here and just talk about this stuff for hours. So, and I agree. One of the things, everybody works on physical, everybody works here, but it's a small number of people that work here when it comes to elk hunting. So let everybody know where they can find all the Elk Bros info, the crew, and definitely give more resources for these guys to expand their knowledge.
Yeah. So, look, you can find out anything Elk Bros just by going to elkbros.com, ELKBROS.com. Everything's there. We have links to our podcasts, to our YouTube channels, our academy's there. I am very proud of our academy. It's still an incredible work in progress. I'm working on it daily, man, trying to get stuff for that. But if you're having trouble with your end game, go to our academy. Um, and for the price of that, it costs me more to fill up my truck than it does for my academy right now. And that's 40 years of experience. So go check that out. But here's the deal. I don't care if you go to my academy. You definitely should go to Treeline Pursuits and check that out. You're right here in the right place right now with Michael. Go check out Elk 101's academy. Buy and learn anything and everything you can. So we're excited. We're happy. We're doing a lot of things. You can even go to our site. We have our Elk Bros Hunting Buddy where you can try to find somebody to hunt with. If you're having trouble with that, it's a free service that we're giving on there. So everything Elk Bros, elkbros.com, Michael.
Perfect. All right, guys. Appreciate all of you tuning in. Sorry about the technical difficulties tonight. We'll get this figured out one of these days. Definitely going to have Joe come back again because, like I said, I got so many questions rolling through the head. So, all right, guys, as always, keep calling, keep practicing, and more importantly, though, have fun. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Wapiti Live Q&A.
Absolutely. Peace, y'all.